He said it the way he said most things that didn't require his full attention. Offhand, certain, already moving on to the next item on his mental agenda. She can leave it at the front desk, or she can go. Either way, it doesn't change my evening. Meredith was standing 12 feet from the half-open door of the conference room on the 14th floor of Carew and Associates, a container of her grandmother's chicken soup warm in both hands, and she heard every word. She didn't flinch, didn't press herself against the wall, didn't feel her throat tighten the way she'd expected it to, that old bracing sensation she'd learned to prepare for over the past 18 months every time Leland said something that landed at an angle. She felt relief. Not the relief of a woman escaping, the relief of a woman who had been waiting for the final piece of a puzzle she'd already mostly solved. She stood there in the corridor for about 6 seconds, long enough to hear Burke, Leland's senior paralegal, the man who'd known both of them for 7 years, and who always looked at Meredith like he was carrying something apologetic, just below the surface of his professional composure, offer some murmured response. Long enough to hear Leland say, "We'll circle back on the Patterson filing at 6, and the particular rustling sound of a man who had already moved on. Then she turned around and walked back to the elevator. She was still holding the soup. The Wednesday soup had started 2.5 years ago by accident, the way the things that end up mattering most usually begin, quietly, without intention, without anyone deciding they were beginning something. Meredith worked at a pediatric urgent care clinic in Lincoln Square, a 12-minute drive from their house and a 40-minute drive from the glass and limestone tower in the Loop, where Leland had made partner 3 years before she'd met him. She worked 32 hours a week by design, because their daughter Josie was 7 years old and needed someone who showed up. Meredith was someone who showed up. She had grown up watching her own mother do the quiet, unacknowledged arithmetic of a woman who made everything function smoothly enough that no one noticed it functioning. Doctor's appointments and school pickups and dinners that appeared on the table like weather, like gravity, like things that simply existed without cost or labor. Meredith had absorbed that arithmetic, and then somewhere in her late 20s had consciously chosen to apply it differently. She showed up, yes, but she showed up intentionally. She knew what she was doing and why. Leland had been in the middle of a particularly brutal arbitration cycle when she'd first driven to his office with the soup. 3 weeks of 14-hour days, back-to-back depositions, the particular hollowed-out quality he got around his eyes when he was running on coffee and stubbornness. She'd made a double batch for herself and Josie on a Sunday, and somewhere between putting the lid on the second container and setting it in the refrigerator, she'd thought, he hasn't eaten a real meal in 11 days. She knew this the way she knew most things about Leland, not because he'd told her, but because she paid attention. She'd driven to his office, signed in at reception, taken the elevator to 14. His assistant at the time, a young woman named Paige, who had the particular diplomatic competence of someone who'd been navigating her boss's schedule for 2 years and had made her peace with it, had looked at the soup container and then at Meredith with an expression that was half grateful and half uncertain. "He's in the middle of something," Paige had said. "I know," Meredith said. "Can you make sure he gets this?" Leland had called her that evening, which had surprised her. He was not a man who called in the middle of a work cycle unless the work demanded it. "You drove to the office," he said. "You haven't eaten." "I've eaten. The granola bar in your desk drawer doesn't count." A pause. Then something that might have been a laugh, brief, almost involuntary, the laugh of a man who'd forgotten how to make room for it but had found a small gap. "How do you know about the granola bar?" "I know everything," she said simply. "Eat the soup." After that, it became Wednesday. Not because either of them declared it. Because the following Wednesday was another arbitration day, and she made another batch, and 2 weeks later he mentioned in passing that the Richardson case was going another month minimum, and she didn't ask anything, just showed up the next Wednesday with the soup. His new assistant, a young man named Gentry, who had the careful, conscientious energy of someone who understood that this job required him to notice everything and comment on almost nothing, learned quickly that Wednesday afternoons involved a thermos from Mrs. Carew and that he should make sure Mr. Carew received it before 6. That lasted for 2 years, mostly. Meredith was not a woman who romanticized anything, including herself. She'd spent 3 years in a pediatric urgent care clinic watching parents absorb news they hadn't prepared for, watching children be braver than the adults in the room, watching the particular calculus of a family trying to hold its shape under pressure. She was clear-eyed by profession and by temperament. She did not tell herself stories that weren't true. The story she had been trying not to tell herself for the better part of 18 months was this one, that Leland had stopped seeing her, not suddenly, not cruelly, just gradually, in the way that water finds its level. The energy he'd once turned in her direction had redistributed itself to the firm, to the cases, to the particular self-contained world of a man who had spent 15 years building something so demanding that it had become its entire own atmosphere. She'd seen it happen in increments small enough to explain away individually. The dinner that ran long because of a call. Then the call that started before dinner. Then the dinner that didn't happen because there was a call, and she'd eaten with Josie at the kitchen table and read to her afterward and put her to bed and come downstairs to find Leland still on the phone in his office, tie off, jacket folded over the chair. The look on his face that meant he was somewhere she wasn't. The Wednesday visits had changed too. She'd noticed but hadn't named it. What had been 30 minutes in his office, not much, never much, but present, real, him actually putting the phone face down and eating something while she sat across from him, had become 20, then 15, then 8, because Gentry would meet her at the elevator and say, with the apologetic precision of a man who understood exactly what he was delivering, Mr. Carew says he'll try to be done by 5:30 if you want to wait downstairs. She had waited. She was not a woman who gave up quickly on things she'd chosen. But she had stopped talking about it. That was the thing she recognized later as the real marker, not the distance itself. Distance in a marriage moved like weather, in and out, but the stopping. She'd stopped saying anything because saying it out loud would have required her to hear her own voice confirm what she'd been quietly, carefully coming to understand. She had become optional. The Wednesday it ended was not a special Wednesday. She hadn't built it up. She'd made the soup the night before, Josie helping measure the rice, small hands dusted in time, the kitchen smelling of the particular warmth of something being made on purpose, and she'd packed it in the insulated container, driven to the loop, told the reception desk her name, signed in. Gentry had come down at the 40-minute mark, not to say Leland was on his way. To explain there was a development with a client, it might be another hour. She'd said it was fine. She'd meant it, mostly. 53 minutes in, she needed the restroom. The one on the lobby level was occupied. Gentry, apologetically, walked her to the one on 14. She was on her way back when she heard Leland's voice through the gap of a conference room door. Not his working voice, the one calibrated for depositions and mediations, precise and controlled. His offhand voice. The one he used when something was peripherally relevant and he was already thinking about the next thing. Burke's voice first, saying something about the parking structure, about whether Mrs. Carew's car was validated. Then Leland, she can leave it at the front desk, or she can go. Either way, it doesn't change my evening. Meredith stood in the corridor with the soup container in her hands and understood, with a clarity that had no drama in it at all, that she was not angry. She was finished. Not in the explosive way, in the way of a woman who had been quietly, privately, completing a very long sentence and had just arrived at the period. She took the elevator back down. Gentry was at the desk, looking up with an expression caught somewhere between relief and the beginning of something more complicated. She set the container on the counter in front of him. "Make sure he eats before 7, she said. "There's a bay leaf in there. Just tell him to leave it at the bottom." Gentry looked at the container, looked at her, said, Of course, Mrs. Carew, in the voice of a young man who understood that the weight of what he was witnessing was not the kind he should comment on. She walked to the elevator, pressed L Road down in the particular silence of a woman who had just heard something she already knew and had therefore used up no additional grief on the knowing of it. Outside, the Chicago wind came off the lake the way it always did in October, deliberate and cold. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment. She breathed. Then she went to pick up Josie from her mother's house and drove to the apartment in Wicker Park that she'd rented 3 weeks ago. She hadn't told anyone about the apartment, not her sister, not her friend Ramona, who worked in the same clinic and who had known Meredith long enough to read her face in the particular way of people who've seen someone through enough that they recognize the shifts even before the person shifting does. The apartment was on the second floor of a building with a courtyard, 2 bedrooms, small kitchen with a window that looked over a strip of garden where someone had planted late-season asters that were still, despite everything October was throwing at them, hanging on. She'd found it through a colleague who'd sublet before. She'd signed the lease on a Thursday afternoon without drama, without ceremony, the same way she'd made all the decisions that mattered most to her. By herself clearly, after she'd already thought it through every possible direction and arrived at the only answer that held. She told no one, not because she was hiding, she wasn't afraid. She was simply conserving the emotional cost of explaining herself before she was ready, but because there was no one in the structure of their shared life who was entirely hers the way she needed right now. Their social world had always been more Leland's than theirs. Strategic acquaintances, professional adjacency. She had 1 box already there. Josie's favorite stuffed rabbit, Cracker, so named by Josie at age 4, for reasons that had never been fully explained, but were non-negotiable. 3 books she'd been meaning to read. A photograph of herself at 29, standing outside the free clinic in Pilsen, where she'd done her residency volunteer hours, laughing at something the supervising doctor had said. She looked like a woman who didn't know what was coming and wasn't afraid of it. She didn't look like she was running. She looked like she was arriving somewhere she recognized. Leland didn't notice for 4 days. That was not a small thing. That was, in the accounting Meredith was doing quietly and without dramatics, the entire ledger. He'd come home that Wednesday night at 10:15, picked up the soup container that Gentry had apparently sent back, set it on the kitchen counter, assumed she was asleep, got undressed in the practiced quiet of a man who'd come home late enough times that silence had become its own skill, got into bed, didn't reach across. In the morning she wasn't there. He assumed she'd gone in early. There was no coffee made. He made it himself, which he was entirely capable of doing, and noted this as a minor inconvenience and moved on. On the second day, the flowers on the kitchen table, she replaced them weekly from the Lincoln Square market, whatever was in that week. She never bought the same thing twice, began to droop. He noticed this the way he noticed a spelling error in a brief. Cataloged it, did not address it. On the 4th day, he opened his side of the closet looking for a belt and saw the gaps. Not everything. She hadn't taken everything. But the blue dress she wore to clinic events, the cardigan Josie had given her 2 birthdays ago, slightly unraveling, which she always wore anyway, the good boots. He stood in front of the closet for a full minute before he called Ramona's number. Ramona told him exactly nothing, in the specific way of someone who had been asked not to lie, but was absolutely not going to volunteer information. He sat down at the kitchen table with the dead flowers in front of him and thought about the soup container. About the note in Gentry's handwriting that said bay leaf at the bottom. About the particular care of a woman who had just overheard something devastating and had still, walking out the door, been thinking about whether he'd eat before 7. Burke came in on the 5th day, knocked once, which he always did, stood in the door of Leland's office with his hands loose at his sides and an expression that was not apologetic but was not neutral either, the expression of a man who had decided between one evening and the next that he was too old to pretend he hadn't seen what he'd seen. "I need to say something," Burke said, and I need you to hear it the way I mean it, not the way you're going to want to hear it." Leland looked at him across the desk. "She was in the hallway on Wednesday, outside the Harmon conference room." Burke didn't look away. "She heard what you said to me." The room went quiet in the specific way. Rooms go quiet when something has just shifted below the floor. "All of it?" Leland said. "I don't know how long she was standing there. I know she had the container. I know she went back down and left it at the desk." Burke's jaw moved once, a small adjustment. "I know that what you said wasn't a bad day talking. It was just what you actually thought. And I was there. And I think you should know she heard it." "Why are you telling me now?" Leland said. His voice was level, too level. "Because," Burke said carefully, "I've watched you work for 9 years, and I've seen you read every room you've ever walked into before most people in it understood there was a room to read. And I think you have not read this one, not once, not the whole time it's been happening." He paused. "That's not a small thing to miss." The silence after that had weight to it. "Get out," Leland said. "Quiet, no heat." Burke got out. He found the photograph 3 days later. Not looking for it, he'd been looking for insurance documents in the study filing cabinet, and beneath a stack of Josie's old drawings that had graduated from the refrigerator to the cabinet over the years, he found it. Meredith at 29, outside the Pilsen Clinic. That laugh, open, unperformed, completely unself-conscious, the laugh of a woman who did not know he existed yet, and was entirely unconcerned by the not knowing. He'd seen this photograph before, framed on her side of the closet in their bedroom, and he'd always registered something complicated when he looked at it. A quality of her he recognized, but couldn't locate anymore in the daily texture of their life together. He understood now, sitting on the edge of the desk with the photograph in his hand, what the complication had always been. She had been happy like that, genuinely, completely, without reference to him, before him, and at some point in the last 2 years, that version of her had gone very quiet, and he had not noticed because he had been operating on the assumption that the version of Meredith who showed up with soup on Wednesdays would simply keep showing up, that her constancy was a fixed coordinate, that her showing up was the same thing as her choosing to. He set the photograph face down on the desk. He sat with that for a very long time. She had found the volunteer program the same way she'd found most things that mattered to her, by paying attention to what was needed and then simply going to do it. The Community Wellness Center on Damen Avenue, 6 blocks from the Wicker Park apartment, ran a Saturday first aid training and health literacy program out of a church basement. It was organized by a woman named Anita, who had the particular no-nonsense warmth of someone who had spent 30 years watching people make the same preventable mistakes, and who had never, not once, stopped finding the work worth doing. She wore a lanyard with reading glasses on it, and had the posture of someone who had stood in front of too many rooms to slouch. Meredith had walked in on a Monday 3 weeks before she'd left the house, while she was still technically in the marriage, but already building the architecture of what came next, and Anita had looked at her application for approximately 4 seconds and said, "When can you start?" "Next week," Meredith said. "Good. The Saturday First Aid Group has been without a lead for a month, and they are starting to improvise, which is never ideal in first aid." She'd been going every Saturday since. Josie came sometimes, sitting in the back of the room with cracker and a book, comfortable in the easy way of children who have been brought along to their parents' work often enough that other people's spaces feel unremarkable. She called Anita the lady with the good snacks. Anita found this entirely reasonable. It was the quietest Meredith had been in 2 years. Not silent. Josie was never silent, and the Saturday groups were talkative and opinionated and alive in the way of people who were there entirely by choice, but quiet in the sense of fitting, of being the right size for herself, in a room where no one looked at her and calculated anything about who she was relative to someone else. She was just Meredith, Dr. Walsh, to some of them. The one who explains things like "you're actually a person," which was Anita's version of a professional commendation. Leland showed up on the fourth Saturday. He stood in the doorway of the church basement in a coat she'd never seen him wear before. Plain, dark wool, nothing that announced anything about who he was in any other room. He looked around the space with the careful attention of a man trying to understand the parameters of a situation before committing to it. Anita was at the supply table. She looked at him the way she looked at everyone who came through the door for the first time, steadily, without hurry. "You here for the group," she said. "I'm here to help," Leland said. "Whatever you need." Anita regarded him for 4 seconds. Then she handed him a stack of laminated instruction cards and said, "These go in the folders. Alphabetical by topic. Don't assume you know the alphabet as well as you think you do." He sorted folders for 40 minutes without complaint or suggestion. When Meredith came in from the supply closet with a box of bandages, she stopped. The specific freeze of a person receiving information the mind hasn't organized yet. He was sitting at a folding table with the practiced focus of someone applying precision to whatever problem is in front of him, regardless of scale. He looked up. There was nothing strategic in his face. No opening designed to achieve a particular outcome. "Hi," he said. She looked at him for a moment, set the bandage box on the nearest table. "Anita know who you are," she said. "She knows my name." "That's not what I asked." "I know." He held her gaze. "I didn't come here to make anything harder for you. I came because I found the program and I wanted to understand where you'd gone." He paused. "Not to bring you back, just to understand." She looked at him the way she'd always looked at things she wasn't yet sure about, directly, without rushing. "The donation," she said, "anonymous, to our equipment fund." He said nothing. "It was the exact dollar amount we were short. Not approximately, exactly." She tilted her head. "You looked at our filings." "There was a gap," he said. "I could fill it." From the back of the room, Josie's voice rose briefly in negotiation with Anita about whether fruit snacks constituted a nutritional offering. Leland's eyes moved toward the sound and then back. "She's here," he said. "She comes sometimes." Meredith crossed her arms. Not defensively, the basement ran cold. "She doesn't know you were coming." "I know." A moment passed between them with the particular quality of moments that contain too much to summarize. Then Anita called across the room asking if someone could help move a table, and Meredith went to help, and Leland went back to the laminated cards. He stayed 3 hours. He moved furniture, sorted supplies, assembled a shelving unit with focused competence, and near the end sat in the back of the room while Josie explained the plot of her book to him with the undiplomatic confidence of a 7-year-old who has assessed her audience and found it capable of keeping up. He did not try to fix anything. He came back the following Saturday, and the one after that. Anita started giving him tasks without the evaluative pause, just direction, immediate, the register she used with everyone who'd proven they didn't need management. Josie had opinions about the placement of the new shelving unit. She communicated them without softening. He listened. He moved the shelf 6 inches. "Better," she said, and returned to her book. Meredith watched this from across the room. She was not warm yet. She was not cold. She was watching in the careful way of a woman who had done the expensive work of building her own footing and was not yet ready to let anyone else determine whether it held. But she watched. On a Tuesday morning at the clinic, she opened her locker and looked at the photograph she kept there. Herself at 29, laughing, unaware, outside the Pilsen clinic, and she thought about the gap between that person and the person she'd become across the last 2 years. The careful going quiet, the way she'd stopped correcting things out loud because correcting them would have required her to say them, and saying them would have been the end of the version of things she was still, at that point, not quite ready to let go of. She thought about the Wednesday soup, the ritual that had started from nothing because she'd noticed he wasn't eating. And then the noticing had gradually stopped being met with anything, and she'd kept noticing anyway, because she didn't know how to stop, and because she'd told herself, month by month, that the showing up was an expression of who she was, and stopping would have required her to be someone smaller. She thought about the hallway, the container warm in her hands. Either way, it doesn't change my evening. And the relief, still even now, the relief. Not at losing him, at finally knowing, clearly and without any room for misinterpretation, that she hadn't been inventing the distance, that it was real, and she had not been wrong. On the 6th Saturday, after the group had gone and Josie was asleep in the small nap room. Anita kept for exactly this purpose. Meredith went to find Leland in the back of the supply room. He was reorganizing the bandage inventory by expiration date. She hadn't asked him to do this. He'd simply noticed it needed doing. "You've been coming every week," she said. "Yes." Josie asked me why. He looked up. "What did you tell her?" "I told her you wanted to help." She leaned against the doorframe. "She said that made sense. She said you're good at the shelf part." Something moved briefly across his face. He set down the box he was holding. Meredith. Her name the way he'd said it when they were first together, not as a preamble to something, just as itself. "I'm not going to tell you I've changed. I don't think I have the right to say that yet." He held her gaze. "But I know what I did. Not just the one thing, the hallway, the words, the accumulated version of what I did. The way I let you become," he stopped, made himself use the word, background. "I let you become background, and I didn't notice I was doing it until I was standing in our closet looking at where things used to be." The basement was quiet, except for Anita washing dishes in the kitchen. "I believed you the instant I heard it," Meredith said. "I want you to know that. Not because you meant it as completely as it sounded, maybe, but because somewhere I'd already known, and hearing it out loud was just confirmation." She held his gaze steadily. "That's the part that costs something real, not the words themselves, the recognition." "I know," he said. "Do you?" "I know that understanding it now doesn't pay the debt." He didn't look away. "I'm not here to argue that it does." She was quiet. Through the small basement window, November was doing what November in Chicago always did, going gray and cold and entirely indifferent to what was happening in any particular room. "The divorce papers," she said. "I haven't counterfiled." "My attorney mentioned." She tilted her head slightly. "That's not like you." "No, it isn't." "Why?" He considered the honest answer instead of the available one. "Because every time I pick up the pen, I can't complete the motion. Not because I'm trying to delay anything. Just because." He paused. "I don't know." That's the true answer. "I don't know what I'm doing right now, and that is the first time I've been able to say that about anything in 20 years, and I'm trying to stay in it instead of making it go away." She looked at him for a long time. Then Josie's voice came from the back. "Mama," Cracker fell off the cot, and Meredith pushed off the doorframe. Over her shoulder, without turning around, "Come help me carry the folding tables before we go." He did. They worked side by side in the easy silence of people whose bodies had learned each other's pace across years of shared mornings and still remembered it, even now. Josie emerged from the nap room with Cracker under one arm and supervised the table folding with the authority of someone who had strong opinions and no interest in hiding them. When the room was done, when Anita had turned off the kitchen lights and given Leland the particular look of a woman who had formed an opinion and was choosing, for now, not to share it, they walked out together into the November cold. Josie went ahead, chasing a leaf down the sidewalk with the complete dedication of a 7-year-old who has decided this is the most important thing happening anywhere in the world. Meredith and Leland stood on the church steps. She reached into her bag, took out an envelope. He recognized it before she said anything. The weight of it, the dimensions. "It's still unsigned," she said. "I've had it for 9 weeks. My attorney is very patient." She held it out. He took it. "I'm not saying we go back to what we were. We can't. That's not available anymore, and I think somewhere you know that too." She met his eyes. "But I've watched 6 Saturdays of someone doing the unglamorous work with no audience, and I want to know what's on the other side of this, if you do." She paused. That's not a promise. It's a question. He held the envelope, felt the weight of the thing inside. Then he put it in his inside jacket pocket. One thing, he said. She waited. If I stop seeing you, not the idea of you, what you actually need, what you're actually telling me, I need you to say so directly. Don't go quiet again. He looked at her. Not for my benefit, because I'd rather know. She considered this, and if you pick up your phone at dinner, I'm going to put it face down on the counter. Every time. No discussion. Agreed. I mean it. I know you do. Down the block, Josie had caught her leaf and was now holding it up against the streetlight to examine it, with the focused solemnity of someone conducting very serious research. Meredith started walking. After a beat, Leland walked beside her. Josie looked back at them from 20 feet ahead, took in the situation with the clear-eyed pragmatism of a 7-year-old, said, "Are you coming or what?" and kept moving. They kept moving. The cold was the kind that made breath visible, small clouds forming and dissolving with each exhale, evidence of the living happening inside all that wool and quiet. He did not reach for her hand. The impulse was there, muscle memory, familiar. He held it because he was trying to build different habits, and sometimes that meant letting the impulse wait until it was earned. They turned a corner. The street opened into the small park the neighborhood kept tucked between blocks like an afterthought. A few benches, 2 trees stripped bare by the season, standing in the particular inert patience of things that have gone through the long part and are not performing anything about it. Josie ran to the nearest bench and stood on it. "I'm the tallest," she announced. "You are," Meredith agreed. Leland looked at the trees. Bare now, nothing visible happening. But 5 months from now, maybe less, depending on the year, they'd be something else entirely. The going bare wasn't the end of anything. It was just the part that asked you to hold on without being given much to hold on to. He didn't say this. But Meredith was looking at the same trees with the expression of someone thinking the same thing, and not in any hurry to wrap language around it. Josie jumped off the bench. "Okay, I'm hungry," she said. "Can we have soup?" Meredith glanced at Leland. "I know a place," he said. Josie grabbed Meredith's hand and pulled. Meredith let herself be pulled, falling into step, and somewhere in the motion of it, the narrow sidewalk, the 3 of them walking together in the ordinary November dark, her other hand found his. Not deliberate, just the geometry of people whose bodies remembered. She didn't move it away. He held on. They walked in the direction of warmth and soup and ordinary light, and the city went on around them, indifferent and enormous and completely unbothered by what was happening on one sidewalk on one November evening on its north side. And there was nothing resolved, nothing guaranteed, nothing that promised what came next would be easier than what had come before. There was just the cold and the walking, and Josie up ahead already planning what she was going to order, and the specific kind of beginning that doesn't announce itself with any ceremony at all. The kind that only reveals itself later as the moment when 2 people chose to keep going instead of stop. One Wednesday at a time, one ordinary choice at a time. Until the not yet became something neither of them had had quite the right word for, standing in the cold. Something like home, only more deliberate, only more earned.